Hey guys, back with another Maple Story M video here. This time, got a lot of content for you guys this past week. Floor 45 Mulong cleared, unranked. Got an arc run with just fair trade and some minimal buffs. And then the finale was the Lotus world record DPM for Paladin. I kind of break down that and explain what I think the biggest difference was, even though I was Party XP, EXP hypers, and I didn't boss rush for the first time, just explaining how I was able to do the damage that I did, even though my stats were much lesser than previous runs. Before I get into the video, however, just want to let you guys know that Spotify podcast is up, Echoing Thoughts, episode number 8. I talk about Absolab and how I think it can be implemented into our Necro Ancient system so that we're not starting from scratch, and how it's going to be, in this February update is coming real soon. So definitely want to check that out. It's on Spotify, all places you can get your podcast. You want to check that out. Have a lot of fun talking about that. But then in this first video, this is ARC. Like I mentioned, I wanted to test out fair trade, see how viable it was. This is the Necro kind of revamp where now it's 100% of the time you can get the 100% crit, but you get the 2.5k dot per second. So in this video, in this run, I'm using no PEs and just wanted to see, if it's possible, if it's viable for those people that are either taking aggro or just doing endgame content. And so far, me as a Paladin, it helps that I have Synchro. It helps that I have a lot of HP reducing abilities that make that dot tick ones at times. But I'm also the aggro for most of the start of the fight with my big burst. So you can see I'm taking a lot of the main damage, but again, Paladins have our own self heal. I can use that to heal up on my own. As long as I'm above 120k HP, then I should be able to survive all the attacks and the lightnings. And so, in my situation, right, I have 140k HP. That helps to deal with the tick damage. It also helps that, Synchro, iframes, and also now kind of 2 minutes in, I'm not the aggro anymore. So positioning is really important, where I'm standing behind the boss, not taking in that front damage. And now I just have to make sure that as long as I'm above 120k HP to survive that lightning, I should be good to go. And so you can see I still am going to die in a little bit because I wasn't paying attention to how much HP I had at times for, I think it was in a little bit. And then I do end up dying to screen crack. We didn't have shell in time, so we ended up wiping some of us, but there I died. But overall, is it viable? Maybe in certain situations. I definitely know fair trade is viable in content like the daily bosses like Commanders and NRA, HRA, maybe even Chaos Root Abyss if you're trying to save buffs, at least those crit rate buffs and those tangs. And I'm sure in ARC it's viable too. Especially if you're not the aggro, taking the top tier damage. Just got to make sure that your HP is in good place. You can dodge the mechanics when you have to and save your buffs and still do pretty good DPS per se. And then this next video is my first floor 45 clear of Mulong. Now, this is unranked. So you'll see the timer starting at around 15 minutes, but I'm already at floor, I started at floor 38. And the reason I did this unranked was because I failed my previous run and didn't get to as far as I wanted, so I just had leftover buffs and just wanted to practice floor 44 and floor 45 if I got there, just to maximize the buffs that I had remaining. And so, honestly, I think Mulong is my favorite content, like I mentioned before. It's just a real grind, especially as you get to floor 45. But I'll kind of explain a little of the tips that I've learned that help me consistently clear floor 44, especially as a Paladin. So first off, you have to understand that, Paladins, we have what we call a Divine Shield that got remastered, and it allowed me right there to tank that full map attack. Basically, I can immune one attack every 30 seconds. So it's not very effective in bosses, but in content like Mulong, for example, it's amazing with rotating between res and Synchro. It lets me play a little bit more aggressive, gives me a little more wiggle room, and so I was able to survive that one attack there. And now I can use my iframes and reses for not just the bomb, but other situations where I'm stuck in with either the full map purple attack, like right there if I needed to, but I found a little space. And then it's all about really it's all about positioning. You know, I think you'll notice something I've noticed, not really sure it's correct, but the farther I am away from Semp, the more often she does tornadoes. And I can't, you know, don't quote me on that, but it feels like something that consistently that I've noticed every time I'm on top of her, like closer right here, she can go through any which way, any skill at any time. So as I try to play a little bit more passive, as I try to play a little bit more, you know, defensive, I notice that if I play from farther range, she'll do tornado more frequently. So just something to keep in mind if you're struggling with floor 44, that might be the case. And then here for floor 45, this is, I mean, it's a long one. It's 8-9 minutes, sometimes even longer for most, depending how aggressive the player plays. But it really, it's a DPS race. And when it comes to DPS, the way you can maximize it is by moving as little as possible, ignoring mechanics, and just trying to stand and attack. And then my tips, things that I've noticed. Now, I'm not the expert. There's people that have cleared way more frequently than me, consistently than me, ranked edition. But I can give you a few tips that I've noticed. Now, Mugong, if you've done it before in the past, it's the skills are the same, right? There's DR, there's sort of a earthquake attack where he jumps up, and if you're within a certain range of him, like that right there, you're going to get one-shotted. That's the big skill you have to look out for because it's pretty instant. Now, anything else where he's jumping up in the air first, then you have some time to respond. Where a lot of these skills are debuffs, like right there, he jumps up in the air. That is the earthquake skill. That is the one the one you have to react to the quickest. Does it again right there. And then you have to understand the certain range, like that front energy orb Kamehameha attack right there is pretty short range and it has a slow load up time. So it's pretty easy to dodge and outrange. Right there, that earthquake. Again, I would have died if I didn't have Divine Shield. And then, of course, DR. Right, and DR is something that you can, you know, if you have an iframe, rotate through, or you can stun it up. And that is really something that is vital to just maximizing uptime, like I mentioned before. But you see I'm staying pretty close. And Mugong, one of the things that you'll notice is that it never actually reaches you melee range, right? It always stops a certain distance away and then does an attack. So once you understand that, you can kind of position yourself better and not have to jump super far back or avoid a lot of damage. I mean, you know, you don't have to move strictly to the corners back and forth. You can walk a little back here and there or dash through if you see the skills, and then it will stop every time kind of the same distance away. And so that's really important, just again, maximizing DPS, not moving as much unnecessarily. And so you don't have to, you can avoid, you know, maybe getting stuck in a corner or getting in a bad position. You can position better here and there where you can, you know, maximize your DPS. So right here, I'm staying that certain range away. Sanko just fell, and I just move slightly back to avoid that skill, move a little bit forward, and then end up in the corner again. And then when he does a skill right there, dash through, jump over, whatever it is, and you reposition once again. So it's just something, you know, it's just a grind, honestly, and there's just no room for error. And when it comes to ranked versus unranked, for me personally, it's a huge difference. It just feels so much more stressful. Like when it's ranked, there's just higher intensity, right? There's more, you know, there's less risk reward for an unranked match compared to a ranked match. And so here I stunned a little bit late, have to pay attention to that. And I just made sure I was careful. And for a Paladin's point of view, right, I can play a little bit more aggro right there if my Divine Shield procs, because I now have that little bit of buffer in case I miss. You also can up jump, right? Both of that earthquake skill and most of the skills in general. That is something that I've never tested. I don't feel comfortable doing it. I'm a little slow to react, but it is something you can do. I've seen you know, other Paladins do that, or other classes do that as well. And so right here, you see, I'm just paying attention. You know, Sanko's up, just standing there doing DPS, not getting stuck in the corners, and just trying to DPS away. And in this run, you know, I was didn't feel the pressure because there's 6 minutes left on the timer, right? In my previous video, I fell literally 1-2 attacks short of clearing, and I ran out of time. So that was very unfortunate. And so this one, I'm not worried about time, just about mechanics and being patient. And I think moving forward, to be honest, I feel like I have enough DPS now. I just have to survive to the end. It's like an 8+ minute, fight where one mistake and you're dead. So that is just kind of my tips. Just understanding that, that it's never going to Mugong is never actually going to touch you, right? Knowing what skills he's going to do. He has a set skill book, but there's no set rotation, right? I've had instances where he does double earthquake back to back. Right there, proc divine shield, where I've had DR literally happen within 15-second, 10-second increments. Just is what it is. That's kind of the fun in it, right? It's so dynamic in a sense where there's no set rotation like Arc, where you really have to react quickly to any sort of situation. And right here, I'm going to clear it in a little bit with Sancho up and on my cooldown. So that was a fun run. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get it ranked. I tried every day this week, just couldn't get it done. I just choked under pressure, honestly. And but this was the first step. Was really excited with that run. But now into Lotus. And this was probably the most surprising of all the content this week. I was not expecting to PR, let alone do the damage I did and hit the world record for Paladins. Now, with that being said, I believe that other Paladins will break my record pretty soon, I'm sure. I only have 18.57 cap, so there's definitely Paladins out there with more gear and better, just as good teams and DPS, and they will easily break it. But until then, I guess I can say I got it. And like I mentioned before, I find it just so interesting how DPS is so, gear is one thing, but it's really just mechanics. Once again, it is really the X factor between, makes up for gear, right? In situations like this run, like I mentioned, I'm party EXP and EXP hyper. So I'm missing 15% final damage, 20% physical damage on top of not boss rushing for the first time since remaster. And all those runs were not as good as this run, obviously. Now, what were some of the factors? Well, one, I didn't die, right? That helps. In previous runs, I didn't die as well, though. And so what made this one a little bit different was dealing with mechanics of the Paladin class, but also of Lotus, right? We've tested out some things that made it so that if I stagger my cooldowns with Lotus, and I'll talk about it later in phase 3 especially, that I'm able to really maximize my DPS. And like I mentioned before, standing in one place and just spamming your attacks and doing damage is the best way to do damage, hands down, right? It's a guild dungeon. And so you'll see in a little bit, this phase 1 was not actually my best in comparison to others. Now, we did have a few deaths, but the time was still solid. A lot of people boss rushed, so that helped. And besides staying alive, how the team does is a huge factor, right? Team comp matters, right, with the crit res, but also just how well your team performs, right? A faster run means PRs for everybody, right? That's just math. It's not complicated or anything like that, especially for Paladins, where we're so reliant on our echo and our burst and our hammers that the longer the fight drags out into that 9-minute range, the less, we're not going to have our cooldowns up and our DPS just craters during that time. So you'll see in this run, it's about just over 8 minutes. So that beats our previous PR time by 10 seconds. And I'll show you the comparison in a little bit. But that is obviously a huge factor, right? Running with the same team, people consistently and over is one of the most underrated aspects of DPS and damage. And so going into phase 3, we're kind of on schedule. This is nothing new or anything insane, in my opinion. So we were chunking. Our team did really well going into phase 3. We were feeling confident. But the real X factor in this runs that you don't see on the charts, right? You see just people show DPM charts, how much damage you did, this and that per minute. But really the X factor is sometimes just boss RNG, right? In Lotus, for example, we're gonna die. The stun isn't gonna register right here for Synchro, but I Synchro through it, but everyone wipes. That kind of sucked. I don't know what happened, but like I was mentioning, boss RNG is a huge factor, right? Just think about like things in Arc where you get portaled every single time, you're gonna lose DPS, and in Chaos Vellum, how often Vellum goes underground. And then same for Lotus, right? This phase 3, the purple orb phase, where Lotus is immune to damage for 15 seconds each per board phase. So that is a huge factor that you don't see. You don't see until you record back, right? But everyone knows that is a major factor. And you'll see this is my previous PR, just under 45 bill boss damage, 8:15 time. But I want you to look at minute number 8. I do 29 bill, and everything else is pretty much the same in this PR run. This is 47 plus, but that minute number 8 is 49 bill. And so I'll explain in a little bit. That's going to be in 1 minute here. But like I was talking about, the purple orb phase, boss RNG, that has to play a factor. People don't understand that. And really, that is what made this run as good as it was, just maximizing uptime. And again, for Paladins, if we get a purple orb phase while our echo and our cooldowns are up, that just is such a huge loss in damage for us personally. So right there, stunned up, the electrocution, the platform phase. But here in the 3rd minute, you'll see all our cooldowns are up, and we have Benediction up right here, 10 seconds left. And you'll see why, I'll explain why I did 20 build DPM, build damage in that 1 minute difference. So right here, we have Benediction up. You can see it, the cooldown, and it just falls off. And then we immediately use Shell. So all of my attacks are getting guarded. So I'm not getting knocked back, right? I'm not taking any damage at all. I can just stand there and DPS. And like I mentioned before, that's the best way to do damage, right? And then Shell falls, we have a platform phase, and right into Synchro. So this entire 1 minute span, I was able to, we didn't have any purple orb phases. We went from Benediction to Shell into Synchro. So that's the entire time, just stand there, DPS. So I was able to maximize my DPS there, do 50 bill DPM. And that's really the biggest difference between that previous PR and this world record run. It had nothing to do with my hypers or anything like that. It just really kind of comes down to mechanics and understanding what cooldowns are up, not overlapping the Synchro, the Shell, and the Benediction, and just maximizing that entire time, that duration, with a little bit of luck from Lotus and the RNG of purple orb phase. But all of those factors, from deaths to team comp to time to not staggering cooldowns, is how I was able to do so much more damage, hit the world record with the cap that I had, not having any of my gear change. So thanks for watching. A lot of fun content this week. I hope you liked it. Again, check out the podcast, like, subscribe here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.